Good morning and a very warm welcome to day 4 of the Northamptonshire Health and Care Partnership Virtual Wellbeing Festival. Hello, my name is Robert Friend from Northamptonshire Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust, and my role today is to facilitate this virtual Wellbeing Festival live session. I'm supported here today by the colleagues shown. We are all here to facilitate and support the session and ask on your behalf any questions you may have of our presenter. The live event is part of a wide range of diverse events running across the week as part of our virtual Wellbeing Festival, to give us all tips and tasters to help our health and wellbeing as we continue to work through this pandemic. Before I introduce our live session today, I wanted to remind you that if you have any questions for the presenter, please put these in the question box and we will do our best to answer these questions at the end of the session. You can also like questions which have been asked by others. Now, given the sensitive nature of today's subject, we are encouraging people, if you want to ask your questions anonymously. Already within the question box, you will find a link for you to provide us with your email address so we can send you a link after the session for your feedback. We really want and value your feedback. The live session will run for about 60 minutes, which includes time for questions. There is the possibility that the session could run over a little bit, but that's okay. The session will give you an introduction to what the menopause is, what symptoms of the menopause are, and how to recognise those symptoms. Suggestions on how best to manage menopause and opening up conversations around menopause. The session is led by Sarah Faraday, mindfulness practitioner from Kettering General Hospital. So without any further ado, I will hand over to Sarah.
Good morning, thank you for joining me today. My name's Sarah and I'm mindfulness and wellbeing practitioner here at Kettering General Hospital. Can everyone see the presentation okay?
Sorry, Sarah, you need to share the presentation. It's just come up, I'll share it now.
Can everyone see that okay?
Yeah, we can see the presentation now, Sarah.
Okay, so thank you for joining me today. My name's Sarah and I'm mindfulness and wellbeing practitioner here at Kettering General Hospital. I'm going to deliver a session on menopause, what it is, how to recognise symptoms and tips on how to manage it. But before I start the formal presentation, I just want to give a bit of an overview of who I am, what I've been doing with menopause work at the hospital as well. So I'm currently going through the menopause, so this for me has been a very personal journey as well as delivering sessions for staff. So last summer at Kettering General Hospital we had a company called Henpicked who came in to deliver training for us. We had about 15 of us who were did the Train the Trainer course, and then we went on to have Henpicked come in to deliver some sessions for colleagues and staff. And sitting in on those made me realise how important this is to offer menopause sessions for staff across the trust. So based on that, we then offered live sessions out in person. So this is the first virtual session I've done, which will be interesting. And we've had over 150 staff attend the menopause session. So it just goes to show how important it is. And the sessions have not just been for women, they've been for male managers and male colleagues whose partners or girlfriends, wives, mums, dads, mums, etc. have been going through this as well. So what we're going to do, we'll go through the presentation, we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. Please don't be afraid to ask questions. This is so valuable to share your experiences and ask questions. And please do remember that you can ask those anonymously, so don't feel afraid that your name may show up. If you want to ask them anonymously, please do feel that you can. And also, no such thing as a silly question. So your question may very well help other people with what they're going through. So we'll come on to now what we're going through in the presentation. So we're going to talk about menopause in the workplace. We're going to talk about what the menopause is, why it happens and when. We're going to come to symptoms of the menopause, some tips on approaches on managing the menopause, some help and support, which will be a very valuable, hopefully, resource for you ladies and gentlemen, and some questions and answers. So, menopause in the workplace. We are an ageing population. Women are the fastest growing workforce demographic, and by 2020, this was written last year, by 2020 and beyond, 1 in 3 British workers will be over 50. And actually 75 to 80% of menopausal age women are in work. It was really interesting when we did the training initially with Henpicked. Back in the 1900s, you had your menopause at aged kind of 50, but your life expectancy was about 52. So really, nobody really bothered with menopause information or training or kind of talked about it. Things were so different then. Working lives were very different. And actually, you had your menopause and you were dead 2 years later. Well, we're going to come on to the average age of menopause. And actually, you know, at the average age of menopause being 51, we have at least, 30, 40 years left. So it's very interesting to see those differences. So what is the menopause? Why does it happen and when? So these are 3 key terms involved in the menopause. So menopause, technically, you may be surprised to know, menopause is technically 1 day. Let me just sit with that for a minute. Menopause is technically 1 day. So the menopause is the day after you have had no periods for 12 months if you're over 50, or 2 years if you're under 50. So you may be really surprised to think, oh my gosh, the menopause, it's not just 1 day. The perimenopause, however, is the period leading up to that 1 day. So the perimenopause is the time when you when most of the symptoms happen. So it's interesting that the perimenopause, we'll be talking about that in the main, and postmenopause is the rest of your life after the menopause, which is the 1 day. So we're going to talk about the perimenopause, you know, throughout this presentation. So the really average age of menopause is 51, and that's very, very approximate. Now, remember, the menopause is that time when you've had no periods for a year or 2 years, depending on your age. It usually happens between 45 to 55 years of age, very, very roughly. Everybody is different. No 2 women will experience the same symptoms at the same time. So this makes it very complicated when we come to kind of diagnosing the menopause and going through symptoms. So really, any time between 45 and 55, you can expect to have symptoms, but it can be younger. And it can also be older as well. So menopause is not an age-related thing. It's really important to stress to people that, oh, well, it's okay, she's menopausal, she's of menopausal age. It can happen really, really different period of time. And it can occur anytime up to the mid-60s. So in previous workplaces, as colleagues I've worked with that were coming up to 60 that thought they'd got away scot-free, and actually that wasn't the case. So it's not necessarily you can't determine that this is a time and an age related thing. It can also be a lot earlier. So looking at early menopause, it is quite rare. So premature ovarian insufficiency affects about 1 in every 100 women under the age of 40, and 1 in every 1,000 women under 30, and 1 in every 10,000 under 20. So it is rare. There was a menopause session on breakfast television last March, and it was really interesting because there was a young girl of, I think, 16, 17, who had had a number of health issues, gone through lots of tests, blood tests, assessments, clinical assessments, couldn't work out, the GPs and specialists could not work out what was wrong with her. Very, very tricky time for her. And actually, by the time they realised what had happened, they actually realised that she'd gone through the menopause really early, and so at 16, 17 she was postmenopausal, so she didn't have the opportunity to have children naturally, which again can be really challenging for somebody, but especially of you know, a young lady at 16, 17. So it is rare, and there's staff that have come to sessions that explained that they had their menopause in their early 20s. So this isn't something that is age related. It is rarer, but it can happen a lot earlier. Surgically induced menopause is another way that menopause can happen. So if you have a hysterectomy, that can bring on menopause earlier than usual. If you have your ovaries removed, an oophorectomy, that can also affect menopause and induce the menopause. Certain types of chemotherapy drugs and perhaps radiotherapy as treatments for cancer can also bring it on. So it's really important to highlight that don't make the assumption, oh, I'm too young for the menopause. It can really happen. It is rare, but it can happen. The perimenopause, remember, this is the time leading up to that one day. So this is the main time when we're going to get symptoms, and we may or may not be aware. So sharing some personal experiences for myself, I probably started menopausal symptoms or perimenopausal symptoms about 6 years ago. I didn't really know what was happening. So if you look at the bottom part of the presentation, it says changes in menstrual cycle. Went on a fabulous yoga holiday, thought, oh, this is going to be brilliant, really relaxing, Greek island, sun, stretching, lovely. 3 periods in 2 weeks. So that for me was not normal. So it's about noticing changes. So menopausal symptoms really can happen really any time from kind of 40 onwards, but it's important to notice changes for you. So if your change in menstrual cycle, if your menstrual cycle is consistent, then that's okay. If there's changes, make a note of them. If you can, try and keep a really rough track of what changes are happening, because it's really common not to be aware of what's happening. And I didn't link this to the menopause. I just thought, oh, my periods are really irregular. Hey ho, it's one of those things. And actually, it's not until I look back now, having done some of this training as well and being involved in this menopause work at the hospital, that I started to realise and track back some of the symptoms. So it's really common not to be aware of things. So we're going to come on to this later as well in the presentation. So knowing your symptoms. Do you have any of these symptoms? Hot flushes, headaches, migraines are really common, mood swings. I remember going to an appointment with a GP and my partner at the time said to me, don't forget to mention your mood swings. What mood swings? So it's really common that other people perhaps will pick up on those as well. Joint pain. Done sessions with staff and people didn't realise that joint pain was a really common symptom. We'll come on to some of those things later in terms of osteoporosis and bone density. Tiredness. So for me, tiredness was more than tiredness. It was absolute chronic fatigue in terms of you feel like you've been steamrolled. This isn't just get an early night and get over it, get some sleep. This was absolutely feeling like you'd had the energy sucked out of you. Heart palpitations. For me, the symptoms, apart from the changes in cycle, were heart palpitations. Always been a bit of an overthinker, but not to the extent where I've had kind of panic attacks or anything like that. So for me, noticing the heart palpitations was quite a strange sensation. Went to the GP, got it checked out. There was no other underlying health conditions. So it is important when we have some of these symptoms to get them checked out, not assume that, oh, it's okay, it's menopause. So you do need to get things checked out, you know, I must stress that. So there's all sorts of other symptoms in terms of, there's not just physical symptoms, although some of the physical symptoms can be really difficult and challenging to deal with. Night sweats, not being able to cope as well as we could. In terms of physical symptoms, we can also have some breast tenderness, a rare but other debilitating symptom is urinary tract infections. There's all sorts of symptoms, weight gain, skin changes, so noticing that your skin was previously dry and now it's not, etc. There's also lots of psychological symptoms as well. Inability to concentrate, brain fog, loss of memory, being really forgetful, losing your car keys, forgetting your phone. So in 30 odd years of having a mobile phone, I've left my phone in the office about 4 times in the past year, and that's very uncharacteristic. Also things like panic attacks, being easily tearful, feeling very emotional, perhaps lacking in self-confidence or feeling unable to do our jobs. So for me, when the menopause hit, it was noticing the heart palpitations first. So I ruled that out. Then I started to get things like hot flushes. People make the assumption that hot flushes are when you physically sweat, and for some people that can be true, but for me the hot flushes was an absolute intense burning kind of from the chest upwards. So if you looked at me, you wouldn't necessarily know I was having a hot flush, but to the point where I would have to go and look in the mirror to check whether my face was on fire, because it felt like I could have powered the national grid. So again, hot flushes, we make the assumption it is the sweating, it's not necessarily. So all of these symptoms can be really varied. Not everybody is going to experience them, and not everybody is going to experience them in the same intensity, and you may notice your symptoms changing. So I noticed that while the hot flushes were subsiding slightly, the night sweats were becoming quite difficult and challenging to deal with. So all of these things happen through the menopause in different intensity. 3 in 4 women will have menopausal symptoms. That's huge, 3 in 4. So lucky 1 in 4 that doesn't have any symptoms and that sails through it. Having seen over 150 staff in these sessions, I haven't met one yet that said they've sailed through it. So it can be really challenging to deal with, not just for us, but for us at work and also for our home lives as well. So this poster is in part of the resources later. There's a link to it. It's interesting to perhaps display this poster if you feel you can in your work areas to help start those conversations about things. Try and join those dots about what symptoms you're getting. Did you know that headaches could be really common in menopause? Migraines? Did you know joint pain was linked to the menopause potentially? So sometimes when I started to get some symptoms, I noticed my knees and my hip was so bad that sometimes I couldn't sleep on one particular hip. So these are all really common symptoms, but again, they're not just physical, there are psychological symptoms as well. So it's interesting to try and join those dots and make sure that you can make sense of the symptoms and noticing changes. If you were always tired before and you're still tired, you need more than one symptom of the menopause. If you were always forgetful before and that hasn't changed, that's still the same, that would suggest that that is not necessarily a symptom of menopause. So for me, when I was going through things, I noticed that I was really forgetful. You'd always see me wandering around with a post-it note or a notebook and a pen, because by the time I'd walked up the corridor and said, oh, I need to email so-and-so about this presentation, if I hadn't written it down, I'd forget. And that was different for me because I was always very organised, always very really good memory, wouldn't need to necessarily write everything down. So again, it's noticing changes for you. If you were always forgetful and you're still forgetful, that's not a change. So coming on to the next slide. So these are hormones involved during the menopause. So there's 3 main hormones. There's estrogen, progesterone and testosterone. So I want to look at estrogen first. So estrogen is involved in triggering the ripening and release of an egg every month ready for fertilization. It nourishes tissues of the body with blood and keeps them youthful and elastic. It helps regulate new bone turnover and cholesterol levels. Now, I didn't realise that high cholesterol can be a symptom of the menopause. Obviously, it can be hereditary or related to diet, but actually it can be partly a symptom of the menopause. Estrogen also helps keep organs such as brain, liver and heart healthy, and it also helps maintain brain power. So just want to remember the brain power from this slide. So we're going to come on to progesterone. So progesterone helps boost feelings of calmness. It can help you enjoy sleep. It can help normalise blood sugar levels. It can help improve mood. It can help improve pain threshold, and it does play a role in achieving and maintaining pregnancy. So if we remember, estrogen can help with the feelings of calmness and of brain power. had a bit of a meno moment there, sorry. And progesterone helps with sleep. We can see that when we come to the graph about changing levels, we've already got, even if we just take one thing of sleep and brain power, we've got some really challenging things going on naturally in our bodies. So looking at testosterone, this isn't just for men. We do have testosterone in our bodies, and it can help us with motivation. It can help us with optimism. It can help us feel more assertive. So when we're feeling not so confident, it can be really challenging. It can help improve bone density. It can help turn fat into muscle, helps with cognitive function, liver and heart healthy, and it also helps with sex drive. So if you go to the GP and they ask you how your sex drive is, don't think they're just being nosy. This is about finding out some of the symptoms, because it's actually really common that libido is affected. So we've also, if we think back about each of things on these slides, we've got cognitive function, we've got brain power, and we've got sleep. So it's really important to just take perhaps one thing out of all of these hormones during the menopause. This, for me, when I saw the graphs with the changing hormone levels, was really, really surprising for me. So if you look at the part across the bottom with the numbers, this is the age in years, so 30, 40, 50. So perimenopause, really roughly, if we're saying it happens 35 onwards, 40. Remember, the perimenopause is when you start to get those symptoms occurring. And look at those levels of changing hormones. Estrogen, that was responsible for various elements and helping keep us healthy with brain power. Progesterone helping us with sleep. So look at those changing levels, and once those levels fall, they never really recover. Estrogen in particular can be really challenging in terms of estrogen levels, and that's why if you're over 45, it's not recommended to have a blood test to diagnose menopause. It's far more accurate to run on symptoms, because actually hormone levels, in particular estrogen, can be fluctuate so much that you could have a blood test in the morning and your hormone levels could come back fine. I had a blood test about a year and a half ago, and that came back as absolutely fine hormone levels. I knew that that was obviously just a blip, because for me, I knew what symptoms I was going through. So it's really important to look at these levels. Estrogen can drop up to 50% from ages 35 to 60, and that's what's happening naturally in our body. We definitely don't choose this. I know I certainly wouldn't have done. I would have unticked the box saying I subscribe to the menopause. So progesterone as well drops from 99% potentially up to the ages from 35 to 60. So this for me was really important to notice that this is something that we can't control, these hormone levels changing. And it's important to know that this happens naturally in our body. So this is going on, but this is over a period of time. If you look from the 35 to the, say, 50 bracket for estrogen and progesterone, this doesn't suddenly happen. This is gradually over a period of time. So again, if you can track changes and notice the changes that are happening for you, it's really important, whether it's keeping a little diary, a notebook, whatever that might be, especially if you're finding it difficult to concentrate, you know, keep a little note of it somewhere, even if it's in a private diary. So the good news is, sorry, just going back to this, the good news is there's lots of things that we can do to help manage the menopause. So we're going to come on to different sections to help manage the menopause. So the first section is a more medical-based approach looking at hormone replacement therapy. Now, I want to make it really clear that hormone replacement therapy is a very, very personal choice. And it can be often a really big decision for women whether to take it or not. Some people want to take it, some people are nervous about taking it, some people want to take it but may not be able to take it. So that's why we're going to come on to several different approaches. So it's really important to stress that HRT is not the be-all and end-all for everybody. And actually, it's a really, really personal choice. It took me probably 2 years to decide whether to go on to HRT. And from a really personal point of view, it was the best thing I did. Having said that, I tried other approaches, and I still take other approaches in conjunction with HRT. And I absolutely respect women's decisions whether to take it or not, because it's a really, really personal choice. So that's why I don't want to spend everything talking about HRT, because there are other things that can really help. But for me, I waited until I had done the menopause training at work, because I thought that will give me a far better grounding in what menopause is and how to go about dealing with it. 75% of women say they don't know enough about HRT to make an informed choice, and that really was me. And a third of women think their symptoms aren't bad enough for HRT. For me, it was a bit of a last resort. And I think a lot of people, as women, we tend to just get on with things. We tend to multitask. Oh, I'm tired. Yeah, that's fine. We just get on with it. We don't tend to make a big deal of it. But actually, I don't think I realised how bad I felt until I started to feel better. And this is the thing. People think that their symptoms aren't bad enough. And usually we only do something, and when we get to the point where things are so awful, we think, I can't go on and need to do something. There have been some controversies about HRT. So in 2000, about 26% of menopausal age women took HRT, and that dropped to 10% in 2016. Lots and lots of scaremongering in terms of headlines about it can cause breast cancer, it can cause stroke, it's dangerous. So it is a considered decision. There are different types of HRT coming out now, which are safer. And there's also different types of HRT. So when the studies first came out and all these headlines came out, some of the research was based on a really old type of HRT, which is no longer available. And it was also based on really small, not statistically significant group of women who actually were aged 70 plus. So 70 plus isn't technically menopausal age, because the average age, okay, it can be later, the average age is 51. So there was lots of bad press around these reports and scaremongering. One thing I have found really helpful, and that I used when I was looking at my journey with the menopause, was the Menopause Doctor website. And Dr. Louise Newson is a menopause doctor. She's got her own private practice. She is going through the menopause herself. She's very open about that. And she has written an easy HRT prescribing guide. So there's a copy here. There's a link to it also on the material and resources. It's a very short, straightforward, like I say, easy HRT prescribing guide. She wrote it for doctors, but she also wrote it for ladies going through the menopause so they could be better informed about the different types of HRT available, the risks with each, the pros and cons, because it's very clear. It goes through pros and cons of each type, and it's really informative. So I would recommend, if you want to have a look into it, look at that link and have a look at it, print it off, download it and read through, because it does make it very clear. So it tells you also what type of HRT you need. So you may need estrogen and progesterone. If you've got a Mirena coil, that gives you progesterone already, so you may just need estrogen. So there's lots of different types of information in there, and it's very clearly laid out. Not technical terms, so it's easy to understand. So don't be put off by the fact that you think, oh, it's written for a GP. It's really accessible. So that's HRT. For me, I have a very low tolerance of medication anyway. So when I went on to HRT, I'd already had progesterone via a Mirena coil, and I was prescribed and decided to take estrogen gel or estrogel. And I was recommended to take half a pump in the morning or evening for the first 2 days, and then up to one pump. I took half a pump for probably about a week, and I noticed for me changes were virtually instant. So within probably 24 hours, I was sleeping better, the night sweats were improving, the mood swings had improved, my brain fog had really cleared, and I just thought, oh my goodness. But I absolutely accept that this isn't for everybody. And there have been some issues with the different types of HRT as well. So the gel is, I've got on really well with. You can control the dose, and actually what you're doing is putting back into your body on a regular basis. So you remember the slides where hormone levels were changing from kind of 35 plus? So really what you're doing with the estrogen is you're putting back a regular amount of estrogen into the body each day. So you're kind of topping up what your body's lost. But it's important with patches as well. I know there was a real issue with supply. So some types of patches were discontinued. some were not available, some had issues with the glue, so they weren't sticking properly, so there was all sorts of issues. I think some of those are being resolved now, but it's just worth bearing in mind some of those issues in the background. So moving on from HRT, we're going to talk about lifestyle and complementary therapies and a complementary approach. So it's really important to look at menopause from a really holistic point of view. This isn't just, hey, I'll stick an HRT patch or pop some gel on my arm and then I'll be fine. It helps to do things in conjunction with this. So diet and nutrition is really important. Getting a balanced diet. Sometimes that can be hard if we don't feel motivated, and it can be really difficult if we're finding that we're struggling and we're not feeling ourselves. But the more healthily we can eat and the better the diet we have, then that's going to ultimately make us feel better as well. Reducing caffeine and alcohol intake. So in terms of caffeine, sometimes for people that can trigger hot flushes. It's bearing that in mind. For me, my caffeine intake is fine because that doesn't give me a hot flush. A glass of wine, or however, actually, as my tolerance is very much lower now, so I find I get a really hot flush or a glow very, very quickly. Stopping smoking, again, that can be really beneficial for us. Calcium and vitamin D are important, in particular during the menopause, because we do lose bone density, and osteoporosis can be challenging to deal with. So if we can take something that has added calcium, or eat foods that have got added calcium, and if we can get some vitamin D, then that's really good. We'll come on to some of the multivitamins in the next section. And exercise is important. And some of you may be groaning. I absolutely get that. Oh no, I don't want to do an hour spinning class. Great, neither do I. This is about doing more exercise than we're currently doing. Getting a walk around the block at lunchtime, getting away from our desks, having a walk around in the evening, doing more than we're doing already. That's what it's about. And again, I absolutely get that when your motivation is low, you're feeling really tired, you're fatigued, you've got joint pain, you're feeling really below par. I can absolutely get that exercise is probably the last thing you want to do, but there's so many benefits of releasing those endorphins and so much positivity that you can actually get from doing a small amount. And like I say, it's not about suddenly putting yourself through an hour's grueling PT session or anything like that. It's about doing something fun. Now, being very uncoordinated, I actually started to do Clubbercise, and I know there was a Clubbercise, a Club Fit, Club Hits mix and a Disco Diva session earlier in the week as part of the Wellbeing Festival. Finding something you like doing and doing it. So for me, Clubbercise, great music. Doesn't matter if you're not coordinated, it's doing what you can, burning a few calories, getting a sweat up, getting your heart rate up, and anything we can do that's weight bearing as well is really positive. So exercise is a really personal thing, but again, it's doing more than you're doing currently. Coming on to complementary and herbal therapies, so things like mindfulness-based interventions, mindfulness-based stress reduction, that can really help us manage our stress and anxiety. So that can be a really positive thing. I know for the NHS currently we've got the free offers for NHS subscriptions for staff on Headspace, Sleepio and some of the other apps as well. So it can be difficult when we first start a mindfulness practice to feel a bit motivated. So if you do perhaps want to download an app, then that could be a good way. Having somebody guide you through the practices can be beneficial. Complementary things in terms of yoga and Pilates, anything like that that is weight bearing can really help with joints and flexibility. And again, it's not doing things, it's being realistic about what you want to achieve. You're not going to suddenly do a handstand in week 1, and that's okay. But doing a little bit of movement and tracking progress for you. It's not about trying to get your legs around your head or do a kind of fly through the air, etc. It's being realistic. Reflexology can be really beneficial. I appreciate that complementary therapies are challenging at the moment with coronavirus and lockdown, and therapies aren't kind of back up and running yet, but that's something you may want to consider. Aromatherapy and aromatherapy oils can be really beneficial, but check contraindications as well. I made the assumption when I was trying complementary therapies that actually it's natural, so therefore it's safe. There are contraindications, certainly for high blood pressure. Some aromatherapy oils can actually, affect some of the conditions you may have. So Holland and Barrett, perhaps is a good place to start if you want to have a look on their website for things. In terms of acupuncture, there's some really, really early research to say that acupuncture can help in a positive way reduce some of the hot flushes. Again, it's very early days yet in terms of evidence and research, but if that's something you wanted to try as and when things are open, then that's fine. In terms of multivitamins, I take menopause support or menopause supplements. I'm going to hold up the pack I take. There are Menopause, but there's also some, I don't know if you can see that, there's also some supermarket own brand ones that are absolutely fine, and they're just as good. In fact, I checked the ingredients, sad that I am, check the ingredients versus the other ones and they're absolutely fine. So that's a good place to start, and a multivitamin never does any harm really if you feel you want to try and take that. They're fairly inexpensive, perhaps £3 a month or £3 for a month supply. Again, there are other things that some people have been known to help. Black cohosh, that was in a pack that I tried from Holland & Barrett called Menocool. For me, that had a really positive impact for a couple of weeks, and then I started to notice that I felt really dehydrated. Usually drink 2 litres of water a day anyway, so very sensible about that. But actually looked, and one of the tiny contraindications of black cohosh is that it can affect liver functions and dehydration. Again, I mentioned earlier I have a real sensitivity to any kind of medication, so just bear in mind that things that are natural can be beneficial, but please check them out first. Sage is meant to be helpful, red clover can help some people. Again, do a little bit of research, check things out, go and have a look on Holland & Barrett or website or some other websites, and check. If you want to go and try the complementary approach, I would absolutely say do it. Try it and be open about it, but manage your expectations. Taking one menopause support or menopause tablet multivitamin is not going to suddenly make all of your symptoms go away, but it's making a note of any changes. So for me, when I ran out of those multivitamins, I actually noticed a difference. I felt far more fatigued. So for me, I noticed a difference that they were helping. What I would say as well is just try maybe 1 or 2 things at a time. If you go into Holland & Barrett or go online and order 3, 4, 5, 6 things and try them and start to notice differences, you're not actually going to know what it is that's done it. So maybe try 1 or 2 things at a time. Perhaps introduce a multivitamin and then bring other things in slowly so that you know kind of really what's happening and you can track what's working for you. So here's some support on getting help and advice. So we had Henpicked come into our workplace to do the Train the Trainer training. So there's their website address there if you want to consider getting them into your workplace for some sessions for staff. Pausivity have got a really good poster campaign, so that hashtag Know Your Menopause poster. And if you go onto their website as well, they have a home support pack you can download. So Know Your Menopause home support pack. So that's really valuable. The Menopause Doctor website is a source of lots of information. It's not just HRT related. Louise Newson, she's very active on Facebook, on social media, or on Instagram. She does lots of live sessions. She very much advocates a balanced diet. She's got a nutritionist working with her, and she also advocates things like yoga and weight bearing exercise. So it's not just HRT, which is important to stress because not everybody is interested in that or wants that. There's lots of Facebook groups out there. Some of them are not helpful. Some of them are very much whinging, which actually, if you're feeling really unmotivated and feeling really low, can actually make you feel worse. The one I have found the most helpful is the Menopause Support Network. You do have to answer a couple of questions to join the group, but the good thing about that particular group is actually once you're a member, you can search for topics, so you don't necessarily have to post anything, and you can certainly find out information. So say you wanted to look at hot flushes, in the search box, once you're part of that Facebook group, you could search hot flushes. That will bring up every post about hot flushes, and you can also look through the comments for advice and support. So don't feel that you have to post something if you don't feel you want to share anything personal. And there's another lady, Jane Lewis, who's doing excellent work. on a Facebook group, and also she's got a book called Me and My Menopausal Vagina. So she tackles some of the harder end and the more sensitive end of things in terms of vaginal dryness and vaginal atrophy. Again, on her Facebook group, you can actually search for comments and search for topics. So again, don't feel embarrassed about wanting to find out more information. So I hope that's helped be informative. Let's go to see some questions now. So I hope that you feel you can ask some questions. Please don't be nervous about any questions. Please do feel you can ask questions. And I think it'd be really interesting to kind of see some of the things that you found from this and see how you could relate to some of those elements and symptoms.
Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Thank you very much for that. Excellent, absolutely educational, developed with passion and empathy. And also, I am now well educated. And it's summer, I think I will educate my male friends to listen to as well. We got lots and lots of fantastic questions, and I'm going to start off with this one for you. So, how can organisations best support women in the workplace with their symptoms? But also, how can we create a culture where talking about menopause is normal?
Ah, what great questions. Really important. So in terms of the culture of talking about it, it's really important to be open. This whole week is about well-being, and I know we've tackled some different and difficult stories about mental well-being. Menopause is just as important as mental health, and actually it can affect our mental health. So it's really important to open up those conversations. And what we can do as women in the workplace that are going through menopause is be open with our colleagues about it. So if we're having a day when we're feeling a bit forgetful or we're going through some symptoms, being open with people, perhaps having a talk with our managers about it as well, and really opening up, breaking down that stigma. Let's face it, I definitely would have unticked that box to say I've subscribed to the menopause. I didn't choose this. This has happened without any of my liking or choosing. What was the first part of the question? Sorry, was it about organisational?
Yeah, Sarah, let me get back to it. Yeah, how can organisations? I know these live events are fantastic. How can organisations best support women in the workplace with their symptoms? And the other was, how can we create a culture where talking about it is normal?
So in terms of supporting women with menopause, I think it's important. I think for us, really, the turning point was getting the external company in to do the train the trainer. So for us, that really embedded that in terms of people being aware at all sorts of different levels. When we had our train the trainer sessions, we had lots of HR staff on there so that they could advise women that were in the workplace. We also had male managers on there as well, a couple of male HR staff, so it was important for them to realise. So I think having some formal training can be really beneficial, because that then shows that there's a real commitment organisationally. And I think having the HR managers on there was positive because it helps them be informed to then support women. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Sarah. So the next question is also an organisational question. Yeah. And sorry, I'm scrolling. So how can I go about setting up a support group within my own organisation?
Oh, that's a good one. We haven't set anything up as a formal thing per se at Kettering, but you could perhaps use some of your communication networks in terms of, could you put something, do you have closed Facebook groups? Could you put something on there to put a call out to people that would be interested in joining the network? Could you then set something up separately, perhaps with either a WhatsApp or perhaps a Facebook group? Could you perhaps hold maybe a menopause cafe, socially distanced, obviously, I get, or a virtual event for people perhaps to talk about menopause issues, and perhaps form a support network that way? I think one of the reasons I wanted to share that poster, the Know Your Menopause poster, is perhaps putting those up in kitchens, in staff rooms, in breakout areas, putting those posters up and start conversations, because actually while you're flicking the kettle on to make a drink, you might see that and think, oh, do you know what, actually I'm going through that as well. So opening up those conversations. So I hope that helps with a few suggestions.
Excellent, Sarah. Thank you very much. It's a really important question here from a male perspective, and I'm hoping it's going to help me out as well in the future. As a male, where can I access resources to support me to have a greater understanding of the menopause, to support colleagues and my partner? Yeah.
What a fantastic question, and really pleased to know that there's male staff kind of joining in this conversation. It's really important to make this not just about women, it's about supporting men to understand it as well. So when we had some men coming to staff sessions, they were really surprised by the variety of symptoms and the intensity of symptoms. I would say look at the resources that I've provided on the last page of the presentation. They're good starting points. I'm not aware of any menopause for men specific. There may be some books on Amazon if you want to have a look. I don't know of any in particular, but I would say start off with some of those resources that I've put on the last page in the Getting Help and Advice. That would be a good starting point. If you want to perhaps leave your email address somehow, then if I do come across any resources, then I could perhaps share those with you at a later stage.
Thank you, Sarah. Our next question is, can you have some of these symptoms before your period starts being irregular, or can you only put it down to perimenopause once your periods start being irregular?
No, obviously I'm not a medical practitioner, I'm not a GP or a clinical practitioner, but symptoms can start while you are having periods as well. It's not just about irregular periods, so absolutely they can start at any time. So if you might be having a full regular cycle but you're still getting symptoms, again it's about noticing those changes. If you're noticing changes in fatigue, in joint pain, in anxiety levels, and you've got 3 or 4 of the symptoms that aren't related anywhere else, then yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Sarah. Lots of detailed information, and we're getting lots of questions and lots of likes on the questions. So the next question for you, is there a natural way to boost hormone levels through the perimenopause time?
Natural way of boosting hormone levels? I don't know about that, if I'm perfectly honest, because obviously I'm not a GP, I'm not a medical practitioner. In terms of boosting hormone levels, what I would understand is that it would be HRT to up those levels. There are things like soy that has some chemicals in naturally that can help, but again, how effective they are, I don't know. What I would advocate though is taking some of those multivitamins and some of those herbal supplements to really help, and perhaps take those before you need them. Because actually at the point when you really start to feel those symptoms, you may already be lacking in some of those vitamins.
Thank you. Now, the next question, I feel I could have asked it myself. So I find I'm forgetful and sometimes find my sentences get muddled.
Yeah.
The other day, I couldn't remember the word buttercup. I'm thinking this could be a typical sign.
Absolutely. But again, it's noticing changes. If you were always forgetful and you're still forgetful, and you don't have any of the symptoms, then it's unlikely to be perimenopause. If you are becoming more forgetful, then I would say it's likely to be linked to changes in hormones and menopause. But again, it's linking the symptoms, remembering that not everybody has all of the symptoms, but it's noticing changes for us. So for me, it was like the wandering up the corridor, forgetting what I was going to say to somebody, or that I was going to email somebody. That for me was a change. So again, it's noticing changes, but it's really, really common.
Thanks, Sarah. I've got the next question. I've been Googling the word on how to say it, so bear with me on this one. Are there any natural remedies for the loss of progesterone? Not happy to and they said they're not happy to have HRT.
Okay, and you know, that's absolutely fine. It's a really, really personal decision. I would advocate people informing themselves and making that choice. Just because I take HRT, even though it took me 2 years to decide to take it, doesn't mean that it's suitable for everybody, and I'm certainly not going to inflict my views on everybody. I'm not sure about natural remedies for progesterone. I know there are some natural progesterone creams out there which may be beneficial. I would say research them. Have a look and see if there's actually any evidence to suggest that they help. please feel free to explore all sorts of different options that are safe, but please make sure you buy it from somewhere that is verified and certified. You know, I certainly wouldn't go and buy multivitamins or HRT off, you know, dodgywebsite.com. So make sure that they are certified providers. And actually, if you have a look at their website or want to find out information, perhaps see if you can have a little chat with them as well. See if you can talk to them and try and find out more information from them. So absolutely, if you want to have a look at natural ways, that's absolutely great. And, you know, please feel free to kind of share what you're finding works for you as well.
Thank you. So the next one is a comment. So was on HRT for 3 years, but have decided to stop as it's a nightmare trying to get it from every pharmacy.
Yeah.
And, oh, sorry, go on.
No, go on.
And then following up from that, there's a question. So what can you do when the GP is reluctant to commence HRT? So
talking about the supply issues, can I just ask, could the person that said that they were on HRT for 3 years, could they comment to say how they felt when they were on it, if that's possible? Because if we go onto HRT and start to feel better, so I've been on HRT for just under a year, I'm feeling really good on it. So my plan is to carry on taking it as long as I'm getting the benefits from it. I absolutely appreciate if people are having difficulties and supply issues getting HRT and the correct type of HRT they're on. I know there's been a huge issue with patches. There's been a huge issue in terms of the quality of the patches, the supply. I know there's been really big issues there. What I would say to the person asking that question is have a look at the Facebook group, the Diane Danzebrink Facebook group, Menopause Support Network. Diane Danzebrink, she's also active on Twitter and on Instagram. She has done a massive amount of campaigning and lobbying with her hashtag Make Menopause Matter campaign, and she's done lots of work with the Department of Health to try and resolve some of these supply issues. So depending on when you came off the HRT, some of those supply issues may be resolved now, but Diane Danzebrink would be a really good starting point for her Facebook group and perhaps her social media accounts if you are on social media. If not, then perhaps have a look at her website. If you Google her, you may find out information there. So I hope that helps. I absolutely understand how frustrating it must be to have been on HRT and then have to come off it because of supply issues.
Thanks very much, Sarah. And once again, very, very detailed information. The next question is, does eating a diet rich on soya impact on HRT?
I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. I don't know. I'm really sorry. I don't know about how soya works with HRT. I don't know if there's any information on Menopause Doctor website. From what I can gather, from what I can gather, it may not be advisable to have too much soya in conjunction with HRT, but that might be hearsay. So I'm really sorry, I can't answer that question 100%. Have a look at some of the resources though. Have a look perhaps at the Menopause Doctor website to see if there's any information there on it. Menopause Doctor is very evidence-based, so there may be some more concrete information there. So sorry, I couldn't answer that 100%.
Thank you. We've had a response from the nightmare trying to get it from the pharmacy.
Oh yeah.
And they say that I felt really well on it, but it was causing me lots of stress trying to source my patches.
Yeah, I can well imagine that, and that must be almost as bad as not going on it in the first place, because you start to feel better and then actually you do have supply issues. Thank you for commenting on that again. That's helpful to know that. I don't have the exact details, but if you go onto the Diane Danzebrink Facebook page, Facebook group, the Menopause Support Network, she did lots and lots of research about how to get the right relevant medication from patches from your pharmacy. And there were some independent pharmacies, not like your Lloyd's or other pharmacies. There were some independent pharmacies that you could get them from. So if you want to go back on it and want more information, it could be really well worth joining that Diane Danzebrink Facebook group to have a look through some of the support there. So I hope that helps follow up with that lady, and I really hope that you get the right support.
Thanks very much, Sarah. I love this platform because there's some very brave and open questions coming in for you, and the information you're giving is lots of detail. So the next question I have is, I am 45 and having most of the symptoms you have mentioned, but how do I know if it is menopause if I have been having depot injections which stops periods? I also have
fibromyalgia.
Thank you very much for helping me out. Every day's a school day. Which symptoms are very similar?
Okay.
So I can read that again if you need.
Yeah, please, because there's quite a lot involved in there. So the lady is saying she's got lots of the symptoms.
Yeah. So this lady's 40. This lady's 45, having most of the symptoms you mentioned.
Yeah.
But how do I know if it is a menopause if I've been having depot injections, which stops periods? Right. I also have the fibro.
Yeah.
So symptoms are very similar.
In terms of fibromyalgia, that can obviously affect joint pain, so that can affect chronic fatigue. So that perhaps will compound the menopause situation. Please bear in mind that if you're 44, that is not too young to start to get symptoms. If you've got most of the symptoms that we talked about, then I would say it sounds like you are in perimenopause. Don't worry necessarily about your periods stopping through the injections you're having. When I had the Mirena coil fitted, I had no periods, and I wasn't expecting that. So that for me was quite a strange concept. So just because you're not having periods but getting all of these symptoms, that would suggest that you perhaps are in perimenopause. But again, speak to your GP. Have a look at some of the resources on there. I hope that helps answer that question.
Thank you, Sarah. So the next question, I take HRT patches but have no sex drive. I feel quite dead inside and I don't feel myself.
Yeah.
I had a full hysterectomy 2 years ago, so went into the medical menopause. How do you know if you are taking the right HRT?
Well, first of all, can I say thank you for sharing your experiences and how difficult that must have been. I don't think people realise how this impacts on our lives, and this can have such dramatic changes. We don't choose this. We don't choose these symptoms. This happens, and so I really feel for the lady that shared that. Thank you for being so open about it. In terms of knowing whether you're on the right type of HRT, I guess that is going to be in conjunction with your GP. It's noticing how long it'd be interesting to know how long you've been on the HRT, because for some people it can take quite a long time to get the right dosage and the right type of HRT as well. I don't know if you could comment on how long you've been on it, perhaps. So for me, when I took the gel, because I had the progesterone as in the coil, it was very, very quick for me, but I appreciate it's not for everybody. And also there was some staff feeding back that when they went on to HRT for their night sweats, which was their main symptom, they actually, they'd have been on different HRT for over 18 months. So I guess it's managing our expectations about this isn't going to suddenly fix everything. In terms of sex drive, that's a really tricky one. And I think if you're with a partner, it's being open and starting those conversations, trying to help them understand how we're feeling as well is really, really key and really important. And that can be a difficult conversation to have. It's not licensed at the moment, but I believe the Menopause Doctor website has information on testosterone. So in terms of increasing sex drive and increasing libido, that might be an option that you may want to consider. But again, you can find out much more information on the benefits of testosterone. I think it's a gel if it's prescribed, very, very, very small dosage. Because I know there's lots of people concerned that if they were to take it, they would suddenly, grow lots of facial hair, etc. So there are ways of having testosterone if you can't get the HRT right. But again, it would be a conversation with your GP that you would need to have. I hope that helps. And thank you for sharing your experiences.
Thanks very much, Sarah. So there's a nice comment from Sam. Loves the pace of your presentation, engaging and snapping, and says, can we have a copy of your fab presentation, please? And the next question is, can you still get HRT or other help if you are post-menopausal?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for your comment, Sam. Yeah, happy to share the presentation and the resources with you. We'll find a way of doing that. I'm very low tech, so I'm sure these fabulous technical guys in the background will find a way of doing that. In terms of postmenopausal, so postmenopause is the day after you've had no periods for 2 years or a year. It depends on whether you've got symptoms or not. So I would recommend perhaps not taking HRT if you haven't got symptoms. So could you, I don't know if the person could comment on whether they've got symptoms or not. From reading and being active on Instagram in particular with the menopause doctor, Louise Newson, she said that her oldest patient taking HRT is in their 90s, and that actually for them that was really, really beneficial.
Wow, thank you very much.
Yeah, really.
That is amazing. So our next question is, how do you know when to stop HRT?
I think it's a really good question. I think that's a really personal choice. So the menopause can last from anything between 4 and 8 years, and we don't always know how long that's going to be. So we don't always know how long we've been having the symptoms. I would say take HRT as long as you feel the benefits. So for me, I don't have a fixed time as to how long I'm going to take it. I'm going to continue taking it as long as I feel well on it. If that changes or there's any health indications that suggest I should no longer be on it, then I will make that decision. But again, it's a really personal choice. I hope that helps.
Thanks very much, Sarah. So the next question is, I'm aged 46, have had irregular periods for the last few years. Last period was in February this year. Having palpitations, hot flushes, night sweats, coping fine with these, but lack of sex drive is the sticking point, especially in my relationship. What helps with the lack of sex drive? Also, how long till symptoms pass? And what point do we know we are through it?
Oh gosh, lots of questions there. All of them really, really common. Sex drive can be something that is really, really sensitive and very tricky to go through, especially in a relationship. Really, really difficult. In terms of the impact on your relationship with your partner, I think it's being open and explaining how you're feeling, trying to start those conversations, because that will help open things up in terms of talking about it. And it's not just, I don't feel like it tonight, it's much more than that. So I would say encourage those open conversations. Perhaps suggest that your partner is aware of some of the presentation, maybe even take them through, if we can share this presentation afterwards, perhaps take them through some of these changes that happen in our bodies without us even wanting them to happen. I mean, menopause can occur anytime and can take really between 4 and 8 years in terms of symptoms. It's difficult to know when we're through the other side. I'm not sure how we would necessarily know that. I guess when things start to settle down a little bit and symptoms perhaps become no longer tricky, or they actually become less challenging. For me, I've probably had symptoms for about the past 6 years, and if the average is 4 to 8 years, then I've probably got 2 years left. But we don't know how that's going to happen. So I think it's tracking the changes for you, but really important to tackle some of those difficult conversations about the sex drive. And that can be really, really an emotionally difficult subject to tackle. Again, some of those resources about the Facebook groups, why not join one of the Facebook groups, the Menopause Support Network, perhaps have a little look and look at some of the topics there, perhaps see what comments people put up there about what suggestions they were, that they found worked for them. So I hope that helps. It can be such a difficult time. Really feel for you there. Keep going, just keep going.
Thank you for those messages, Sarah. Now, the last few are comments, and myself and Dave will kind of share going through those with you. The one from me is from Lauren in recruitment. She wants to say a big thank you, really interesting, and she has some great takeaways to discuss with her mum.
Oh, great, thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Lauren.
Thanks, Sarah. The next one is from Kat, who just wanted to share that I'm 60 and still menopausal. I've had some issues with supply recently for patches, but when I was not on it, I felt 90, my joints hurt and the night sweats were awful. I think the message is, like you said, as Kat says, stay with it. And if your GP is not helpful, persist anyway.
Absolutely.
And something about Everall Conti patches are now available. I'm sorry about my pronunciation.
Everall Conti, yeah, that's fine. Dave, I wouldn't expect you to know how to pronounce some of the names of patches.
Thank you. We have got a question here. So I'm finding HRT is putting me back into a monthly cycle. Is this normal?
It is normal. It can. It depends on the type of HRT that you're on, but yeah, it actually can put you back onto a monthly cycle. Again, I would just track that and just keep a note of that, but that is normal, yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. And we've got a couple of people coming in saying many thanks for your responses. I will contact my GP. And someone has said, yes, I've still got the palpitations, etc. I think this was from an earlier question.
Yeah.
Thanks. I will ask my doctor.
Yeah.
And sort of the last question here is, I'm finding that I have almost zero emotions. Am I guessing this is a symptom?
It very possibly could be, because actually we could go one or two ways. We could either be really emotional and overly emotional, very tearful, and really struggling to cope with our emotions, or actually we could almost be the other way and blocking them out. So I would say if you've got that in conjunction with other symptoms, then yes, it's highly likely. And remember, we're all different. Not everybody experiences these symptoms in the same way.
Thanks very much, Sarah, for all that detailed information. I'll now hand you back to Robert, who will just bring it to a close.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah, for facilitating. I mean, such an insightful session about the menopause. You know, you've delivered it in such a sensitive way. You've been open about sharing your own experiences, and I'm sure it's been helpful to so many of us. And I think that's been reflected in the questions that you've received during the session. And I'm sure everyone will join me in thanking you for taking the time out today, for sharing your learning, insights and experience. And also, I'd like to extend that thanks to everyone who's asked those questions, you know, such open questions that they've asked during the session. So thank you to everyone. And also in regards to access to the presentation, what we are going to be able to do is add that to the website after today's session, so everyone will be able to get access to that resource and share that as well with their partners and with colleagues. So thank you so much for that. I'm just going to talk through. So we're running a prize draw over the course of the week. In order to enter the draw, you will need to share your feedback for this session with us. Your feedback is so valuable, and we really value that feedback, and you know, feedback is a gift. So what we're asking you to do is please click on the link in the question box to provide us with your email address so we can send you a short feedback form. The form will only take a few minutes. My colleagues have just posted the link in the question section again, and remember, completion of the feedback form gets you entry into the prize draw. And as they say, you have to be in it to win it. I'd like to say a massive thank you to the behind the scenes facilitation team. And finally, a thank you from all of us here to all of you for the amazing hard work, determination and commitment, not only during this pandemic, but every day, making a difference to the people you are supporting. And finally, can I just say, wow, what a week we are experiencing so far during this virtual Wellbeing Festival. Watching and hearing such inspiring and thought-provoking live and pre-recorded sessions to support our well-being. It's been fantastic, and it's not over yet. Remember to check out the website to see the full range of fantastic activities available for the remainder of the week, and also to catch up with any sessions that you may have missed or you want to watch again. I know there'll be a few on watching again. And most of all, enjoy the rest of the day and stay safe.